Okay. Should we start? Hi all. My name is Milena Pajic, and I'm a software developer by education. And for more than a decade being in the IT industry, I've been coding, leading distributed teams, and international projects. I'm beyond excited to be speaking in this amazing conference for the third time. In 2012, I shared my broad experience in Kanban, and in 2013, a colleague of mine and I talked about, importance of a timely feedback. And 5 years later, here I am again at the conference 10th birthday. Today, we are going to talk about how to handle risks. And the main takeaway I would like you to get from this presentation is that it's a simple, iterative process that can save you and your team and your stakeholders unnecessary headache. Okay, now, I saw yesterday that majority of you are developers, but just to wake you up a little bit, let's raise your hand if you are a software developer. Okay, more than a half of the room. Okay, any QAs? Okay, good, because yesterday I haven't noticed that there are a couple of them, let's say 4 or 5 raised hands. And any team leaders, project leaders? Okay, good. There is like, I don't know, third of the room team leaders. That's good. So what I would like to explain you now is why this subject is so important and how it links to your role and your profession. First of all, it depends on budget. It's very closely related to the budget, and we all depend on the budget. Secondly, every project has its technical challenges, and the team needs to figure out what are the most appropriate tools, environment, and programming languages in order to make development and maintenance smoothly. And lastly, it is a team activity. So some of you may think, I'm a developer or I'm a tester. It's totally outside of my scope, and it's the responsibility of a team leader. However, every team member has to give their 2 cents and contribute in. Now, some of you also may think, okay, I might have too much of technical background and it can be hard for me to think about managing risks. Or you might be too young to see the broader picture at this point of time. But I will outline the base of the process, and you will see that it's simple, easy to use, and it won't take too much of your time. So today, we will talk only about 4 steps. So entire process fits into 4 steps. First of all, there is risk identification and creation of the risk registry. Then we have risk evaluation and probability and impact matrix. Mitigation plan steps in. And at the end, we will talk about contingency planning, or plan B. So this slide you will see a couple of times during the presentation because I find it so important, and I will emphasize this a couple of times. So each of these steps, after being identified for the first time and defined for the first time, you have to repeat them iteratively, either during the sprint planning or sprint retrospective. And it should be a team activity. There is no way that you can just handle and manage your risks at the beginning of your project and then leave it aside until the project ends. So you have to repeat it. Okay, are you ready for the first step? So, first of all, what is risk registry? A risk registry, or a risk log, is a guiding document that contains all of the crucial information for our team. Hello, come in. So the purpose of the risk registry is actually to state all of the identified risks. So what we also have, it defines the priority, probability, and impact of the risks, and mitigation plan. What are the actions to perform in order to mitigate them? We also need to think about Plan B. Plan B is the last thing to come up with. I lost my slides for a second because of the crowd, sorry. Okay, so these are the steps we should do. And I think I should show you this example, how the risk registry looks like, so you know what we are going to do today. So we are going to fill in together this form. It's a free form. You can use any template that suits you and your team the best. This is just an example that I'm using for years, for ages. It's very simple, and you can see that it contains only ID, risk description, it has priority, mitigation plan, and plan B. You recognize those 4 steps that we will go together through them. And I will use one example from the real life, and we will fill in the metrics together. So you can perceive the risk registry as a tool that can make you become aware of the project pitfalls, to address issues if and when they happen, and to make sure you cover different aspects of the project implementation. So risks should be defined as soon as possible and as good as possible, and should be shared with the entire team and all stakeholders. Okay, let's just jump back one step back and define what risks could be. I hope you all agree that risks could be, there are some condition that is uncertain. But if it happens, it will influence our project. And that influence can be positive and negative. If we have positive influence, then we are talking about opportunities. If we have negative influence, we are talking about threats. And today, we are going to talk only about threats in this presentation. So let's agree that the risk is actually a problem in our project. So even most carefully planned projects can run into trouble. So it doesn't mean that you should just stay hopeless before in this situation that is unknown for you. So what even on contrary, the teams that are planning upfront, the teams that are identifying and analyzing risks on the early stages, they have their feet firmly on the ground. And as risks are painful and projects have time, cost, and scope constraints, I can tell you from my experience that this is possible to be successful only with the committed effort of the entire team. Okay, so you would now say, we already have so much stuff to do, how to collect this information, how to get to this information, how to identify the risks. I will show you now a couple of information gathering techniques. You are basically probably familiar with most of them, but maybe you haven't heard that they can be used for risk identification. Some of them can be used for requirements gathering, but the two most commonly used are questionnaire and brainstorming. I will not go through all of these techniques today because they are well explained and you can easily find them online. I would like to focus more on one risk that is very common in IT industry and that we can analyze it together and fill in the registry with it. So let's see if all of you know what turnover means, employee turnover. Yes? Okay. Okay, exactly. So from the perspective of the risk, if we are looking from the perspective of a team, it means that it can happen that some of our best engineers can leave the project or the company out of blue. Okay, and if this happens, they inevitably they take some critical information and knowledge base with them. Even if this is just temporary or permanently, it will cause some errors and delays on the project. And the team that is left needs to figure out how to handle the situation that just happened. So let's see, and let's use this risk as one that we will analyze. And for the first step to finish it, we just need to add a description of the risk in the risk registry. Please, in the practice, use better description than this one. This is just for you to remember what we are doing. Okay, and then we can go to the next step. Next step is risk evaluation. So now that we have our risk identified, there are two more things that we need to think about. So it is a probability that a risk can happen, and there is an impact. What if risk actually happens? What will be the impact on our project? And after we have these two elements, we can create a probability and impact matrix from which we can get priority of the risk. So priority of the risk is not something that you just, what is the priority of the risk? Employee turnover. I don't know. We should come to it implicitly from probability and from impact. So this step, as the previous one, is also recommended to be done together with the whole team. And depending on the nature of the project or its complexity or your team's nature or company's preferences, you have different scaling for probability. So let's go quickly through this example. So it can be unlikely. Those are very rare risks with almost no chance for occurring. Then we have low. Those are the risks with a small chance of occurring, and they are uncommon. Then we have this 50-50. They are more common risks, but they have a half chance for occurring. And high, they are highly likely to happen. The last one is definite. You should address them first because they will happen. They will develop for 100% chance. Okay? The same as we have for impact. So impact, we can say there is insignificant. These risks they don't represent any threat to the project, and they don't have serious consequences to the project if they happen. Then we have small. They are realistic, and they can make some negative consequences to the project. Medium, they can provoke negative consequences, and they have moderate threat. They are moderate threat to the project. We have critical. They are with a serious impact and substantially negative consequences. And catastrophic, as the name says, these are the ones that can make entire project to fail. So you should. They are of the highest priority, and you should take care of them. Now that we have these scales, I just want to tell you that, again, you can use the template that is fine by your team. This is just what I'm using, what I'm suggesting. Even more, in the practice, I don't use 5x5 matrix. I use 3x3 because usually it's enough. So you can make your tailor-made templates for you and your team. And use it, and now we can fill it in. But before we fill it in, let me just say what is missing: ranking. So we need to think about ranking the risks that fall into this matrix. So the ones that have higher impact and with a higher possibility of happening would have higher rankings. Yeah, now it's logically to conclude that those with a lower impact and with a lower probability of happening will have lower impact, lower rankings. And from these rankings, we can figure out what is the priority of our risk. So let's see, you see different colors. I hope everyone can see the colors, but let's say there is a green one for minor risks. Negative consequences of these risks are minor and they're unlikely to occur. Then we have blue ones. There are significant risks. They're more likely to occur and they have more serious consequences on the project. And you should perform some steps to try to avoid them. But be careful and use your resources wisely. Then we have orange, yes, and these have significant consequences and they are more likely to happen. You should address them promptly. and the red ones are extreme ones. So they are with the severe consequences, very highly likely to occur. You should respond to them immediately. Okay, so now you see the legend. You see the color-coded group the risks can fall into. Again, this is just an example. It doesn't have to be like this. It depends most. Let me explain. For example, if you're working on a project that is very critical, that there are human lives depending on the system, or in a case system fails, company will lose a lot of money. For sure, you will have more extreme cells. But if you're working on a project that is more relaxed and that you can allow to yourself that customers call and say, yeah, it's not working, and yeah, fix it, and you do it tomorrow, rare but possible, then you will have more minor ones. Okay? So what I usually do, what is a good practice with a team in a conference room, I put on a big screen risk registry where we identify the risks, and then this matrix, and I challenge the team to come up with the idea, what would be probability, what would be impact of it. So it's not good the team leader is doing it alone, okay? And just for the sake of this presentation and to fit in time slot that I have, I will not do this now with you. I will just assume that you will all agree that our risk that we are analyzing, employee turnover, has a high probability to happen and medium impact if it happens. Let's say it like that. What is important, more important than if I did it correctly, is that you have this intersection in between probability and impact, and you can already see that priority is there. So our risk is of priority major. If you remember in the risk registry, the first column was ID, so the ID of the risk is 1, and we can just put the number there. So it's not like a highest priority one. It means the ID of the risk. If you have 10 risks, it will be 1 to 10 filled in the matrix. And the last thing to do in the second step is just to transfer the information from the probability and impact matrix into risk registry. So we came up with our employee turnover risk to be of a major priority. Now we can, I think, jump to the third step. The third step is mitigation plan. So I'm not sure about you guys, but I'm not a native English speaker. And from the entire the risk management process, I had the most challenge to understand what mitigation and contingency means. For me, and from my language, where I'm coming, it doesn't make sense. So I would like to maybe there are native speakers here, but maybe not. I would like just to try to explain to you what word mitigation means. So it is actually an action that you perform in order to reduce severity, seriousness, and painfulness of something. So as risks are painful, mitigating a risk means to come up with a set of actions that could eliminate the risk or impact it makes. Okay? So usually how I do it is like I ask the team, so how we can handle our risk that we just identified. And we can say that we can try to completely eliminate it, so we will knock down the cause of it. Or on the other hand, we can just try to reduce it, so to reduce the probability and impact of it to happen. In the agile world, however, there are 4 very well-known strategies how you can mitigate the risks. Okay, no, threats, to be more precise. So now we are talking only about threats. For opportunities, there are different strategies. You can find them online. Let's focus on the threats now. So these 4 ways, 4 strategies, you can see at them, look at them like different ways of how you can deal with the risks. So before you make a choice, which strategy, I will explain your strategies just in a second, but before you start decide which one to use, there are some inputs main inputs that you can take into account. So it is a current situation in your project, probability and impact of the risks. There is experience from the last project, your company preferences, or technology development. So it depends. Now, let me show you and let me tell you what are these strategies and how and when you can use them. Number one is risk acceptance. It means we will do nothing. It means it's acceptable alternative, and we know this because we calculated the cost. So the cost of doing something, the cost of any other three alternatives for mitigating this risk is more expensive than the risk itself. So it means that you have a risk that will, with a low probability of happening, and if it happens, it has a low impact on your project. So why wasting your resources on mitigating it? So in this case, the most important is that the team is aware the risk is somewhere there, and that the team agrees if it happens, it happens. Okay? And if you choose this strategy, the only important thing to do is that you communicate this to all stakeholders. So everyone is aware that it is accepted. Number two is completely opposite. It is the risk avoidance. So you will do anything in your power just to eliminate the exposure to any kind of risk by changing the parameters of your project. So by eliminating the risk, you can actually sometimes change the scope of your project. And this strategy usually occurs when the team leader refuses to be engaged in activities that will induce a risk. So you should be careful with this one, because by trying so hard to avoid one risk, you can unconsciously create a set of new risks that are unknown and that they can have higher impact on the project than the one that you tried to avoid. So this is the most underutilized strategy of all of them, and it is the most expensive one of all the strategies. Then we have the third one. It's risk reduction. This is actually a combination of previously two strategies, risk avoidance and acceptance. So you are accepting at some level that risk is there, but you will perform some steps in order to reduce the probability of it happening or the impact it has if it happens. So this is not necessarily an inexpensive technique. Sometimes it can cost you some money. It can be like an, apologies. It can be sometimes that you have to invest more in your project, or that you have to engage more resources, maybe to accelerate development, or maybe just to make some twists, even twists in the project or product development. But this is the most common strategy to be used in high technology projects, industries. And there is the last strategy to use. This one is nice, transference. So it literally means that you allocate your risk to a third party best suitable to manage it. So you are handing over your risk to the third party that is willing to take care of it. And in this case, let me give you an example. The best example, customer service. So you are your team is an expert in making a product, but you don't have experience in 24/7 support to your customers. You would likely want to outsource that service to a professional service provider. And then you can stay and focus on your core business, and you make sure that right people are doing right job. Sounds good, right? But there is a price. Your contractors will be willing to take care of your risk, but for adequate reward. So you have to pay that. And what you need to do is just to come up with the risk. What is the cost of the risk? What is the award what is the cost you will pay, and to compare the two. And you need to make sure that stakeholders are aware of it, and the contractors are aware of this comparison, and only then you have economically justified situation where you can use this strategy. Okay, let's go back to our risk registry, those 4 strategies. We will use one of them. So we have employee turnover as a major priority risk. And in software industry, as I already said, the most common strategy to be used in this situation is just risk reduction. So what a team leader can do in this situation, what is the set of actions it can be performed? It is increased collaboration and information sharing by introducing pair programming, common code ownership, frequent reporting on a daily stand-ups. There is an interesting term that you may stumble upon just in order to better understand our risk that we are analyzing. And it's not so positive and not very appealing. It's a buzz factor. And it makes you think, what would happen with my project if the key team member gets hit by the bus? There is more positive one, lottery factor. Now you ask yourself, what if my best engineer wins the lottery? Okay, so if you take those actions and if you make continuous information sharing and knowledge sharing, you are reducing the risk. It doesn't have to be hit by the bus. He can just leave the company. Okay, so, and even more, in more motivating and encouraging environments, employees feel rewarded, and it's less likely that they will leave project and the company. Okay. So once we set up our actions, it's not just good enough to put them on the paper and share it with everyone. We have to do something with those strategies. We have to perform those actions. And there are 3 factors I will outline now that can influence success of these actions. It is a people's influence, meaning that collaboration between stakeholders and team members should be kept open, frequent, and with the aim to help in increasing quality of our project. And then we have proper planning. What we planned has to have some estimates, and we have to have actual time spent, and it needs to be integrated into a project planning at the beginning. And then we have iterative analysis, again, because iterative approach prevents us from omitting the risks, from overseeing important aspects of the project and changes that can happen in our project. So once again, I told you I will show this a couple of times because agile development methodology provides a proactive framework for risk management. So the risks are being tackled and prioritized on time. So what does it mean? In case you get extremely high priority risk, you will probably get it on time and you will handle it on the early stages because of this frequent reassessment of risks in a positive manner. So to summarize these 3 steps, we created the risk registry by identifying our risk. Then we evaluated the risk by using probability and impact matrix. And now we came up with a set of actions how to mitigate the risk. The last step that is still left for us to do is contingency planning. Again, another English word that doesn't make too much sense for me. But if you say plan B, I tend to use plan B because it makes more sense for me. So it makes us think, what will happen if our mitigation plan fails? So we plan how to reduce it, but it fails. So contingency, simply put, can be seen as, you can think of it as actions to be taken in case the risk itself actually occurs. So once you prioritize the risks and settle with a mitigation plan, it is now time for you to add contingency planning to your agenda. And there are endless possibilities in project and product development, but the key thing is that you think of contingency as something that will prepare you for unknown. Okay, and you have a picture now why this is important, because it makes you prepared. But let's look at it just from a different perspective. Most of the big companies and big businesses, they already have upfront the set of contingency plan ready, so they can choose the best plan B and practice it in advance. So this is enormously important for critical systems. Again, this is the activity that should be performed by the entire team iteratively. And why is that the team should be involved? Well, they're already engaged. So they already were involved in identifying the risks and evaluating and creating a mitigation plan. So they are already there. They are in a daily communication with the customer and already have their hands deeply in the code. So just a couple of guidelines for you, how to best create the contingency plan. So your main goal is to keep the project on track. Look closely what actions you can perform in order to deliver a minimum value and the service, minimum functionality and the service. Define time periods. Think about the triggers that can cause you to implement your contingency planning. Think about the actions and the timing of those actions, and also think about who will be responsible at each stage if it comes to this situation. Keep the plan as simple as possible. As I said, use the plain language so that everyone in the team can understand it. Include a contingency plan as a must-have in your project. That means that if you are a team leader, don't do it by yourself. Make sure that you train your team, or if your team member asks to be trained, so that you know how to deliver a contingency plan by yourself. And look for the opportunities to reduce the risk whenever possible. So this is the positive side. There is also you can also find some obstacles on your way to creating a contingency plan. It's not all that good as it sounds. So there are two things that usually are these obstacles. One of them is that team members usually, from my experience, don't see contingency planning as an urgent activity, and they will try to skip it or to avoid it completely. And the other one, at this stage, the latest stage of the process, the team does not have motivation as at the beginning. So they already spent their energy and time in identifying risks and in creating a mitigation strategy. So the role of the team leader here is just to increase motivation somehow of the team and to make it. Okay, let's see. In our risk registry. So employee turnover, major priority, risk reduction, increased collaboration, and information sharing. We had that, but it failed. So the plan B in this situation could be, for example, to onboard a new engineer as soon as possible. And in the meantime, to make sure to rethink about the scope until the new guy or girl that joined the team just fits in the team, the project, the domain, the technology. It's hard to redefine the scope, but it should be tried to be done. So that could be our plan B. So once you have this risk registry, again, it's not enough just to have it and put it somewhere. Okay, we are done. We are finished with it. So it should be maintained. Okay, you need to add new risks. You need to handle already identified risks. So one important thing, after you shared it, after you create it, you have to share it. Make sure that everyone has access to it. But to perform maintenance, there are some actions you can do. So review the plan on a regular basis. I already told you at the beginning, iteratively. The best is to be done either during the sprint planning or sprint retrospective, or if you are not doing Scrum, I don't know, in a cadence of 10 days, let's say. Then make sure to communicate and share the plan with the team, but also with the stakeholders. Don't forget the stakeholders. Ask people if they understand their roles and responsibilities. If you engage your team to handle, together with you, your risk registry, it's important that they understand what they need to do and when. For that, you can provide unnecessary training if needed. And also, you have iterations. You have sprint planning and sprint retrospective. But if something is urgent and you can't wait, use the daily stand-ups to quickly go to the specific risk. Communicate with stakeholders and include customers as soon as possible if that is a case in your project. And always be aware of the plan B. Okay, so we rounded up our risk management process. Just to go back, we created as a first step identified risks and created our risk registry. Then we evaluated the risk by creating probability and impact matrix. We got the priority of the risk. Then we set up the mitigation plan. And at the end, we came up with this plan B or contingency plan. But before you leave, just one more thing to share. So there is another question to ask you. So we have all this process. But what if introducing this new team member causes another risk? So you see, by introducing, you had this in your projects, sometimes it can lead to poor performance. So the performance of team just drop. And the risk, this risk is called secondary risk. I want you to be aware that they are there, and you should take care of them as well. So the secondary risks are the risks that are a direct outcome of actions that you perform to eliminate other risk or to handle what happened because of the risk occurred. And the secondary risks are the ones that you should take care in the same manner as we just spoke. All 4 steps to do with them and to include them in the risk registry. Be careful because these risks are common in software development. And there is just one more, residual risks. I think you don't have to take care too much about them. But you should be aware of them. There are deliberately accepted risks. They remain after everything is done about them, but the team is okay with it. And usually, you don't have to do anything about them. But if you choose to handle them somehow, you can just make a contingency plan for them. So the last risks I said, they are known also as leftovers. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And if you have some questions or you would like to chat a little bit, please join me on the stage because I also have something for you here. Thank you.